Hi friends, Prepared Suburbanite back at you. I watch an awful lot of other preppers videos, and I do spend quite a lot of time looking at internet news, podcasts and all that. And one of the most prevalent theories is that we're heading for World War III. I've even mentioned it here on my channel, and I think it's a real possibility. So what I want to talk about today is what can a prepper do to be prepared in case World War III actually happens. So stick around. So, here's the deal. I think what we need to be contemplating as we look at the potential, anyway, for World War III, and it doesn't really matter how it starts or who starts it, but I think it's a relative possibility. And what can we do as preppers to be prepared for what may be a real life scenario? Well, I think about the only thing that we can do is go look at history. And if we look at history, we can find that during World War II, many of the items that we're so used to being able to buy without any restrictions were rationed. During the spring of 1942, a rationing program was established that set the limits on the amount of gas, food, clothing, meat, sugar, fat, butter, vegetables, and fruit, tires, clothing, fuel oil, and I think I've already mentioned gas. Well, I did a little bit more digging on the gas question, and the rationing during World War II that was brought about by the Roosevelt administration, who established the Office of Price Administration. They limited us to 4 gallons per week per person. Well, that's not a lot of gas. If you're getting 20 miles to the gallon, that gives you not much. It gives you 80 miles. And if you're driving 10 miles round trip to your place of employment, you may come up a little short on Friday. So I think we need to be absolutely prepared for what may be coming in World War III. Our parents, I'm 72 years old, so my parents lived through the Depression. My grandparents actually did a pretty good job surviving and thriving during the Great Depression of the 30s. But what they learned during that period of time was resilience. They learned how to make do with what they had. They learned how to take advantage of every opportunity that they had. They grew gardens. They learned how to can vegetables that they grew in their garden. They learned how to be frugal. They learned how to cut corners on pretty much everything so that they could make it through the Depression era. And in 1941, December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, the Japanese Imperial Empire decided to attack the United States at Pearl Harbor. And shortly after that, war was declared between us and Japan. And not too long after that, the Roosevelt administration enacted rationing, and it was pretty tough to get along with. I'm looking at trying to compare what they did back in 1942 to what we're used to today. And I think the shock value is pretty big right now. So let's talk about what they were rationing. Each individual would have to go to a local board, a local group of people that were recruited or assembled by the federal government under the Emergency Price Control Act and the Office of Price Administration. And we would have to go, each individual would have to go to get their ration card. And I've got a picture of a ration card right up here that I'll show you that they were, that's what they were issued. And there were certain levels of points that were awarded to certain individuals. They got red points and blue points, and you could spend certain red points on certain things and certain blue points on other things, and it was relatively confusing for a lot of people until they all figured it out, and that's when the black market started, but that's a whole topic for another video. But once folks started figuring out what they needed to be doing, they would use these ration books to supplement or augment or actually purchase for day-to-day use things like meat, food, all kinds of different food, sugar, fats like lard and butter, vegetables and fruit, gasoline, tires, clothing, and even fuel oil that ran their furnaces. And they would be rationed based on their particular circumstance, who they were, how big their family was, and that's what they had to live on at the time. So when you think about being rationed, you've got the government out there saying, if we don't ration all these things that our troop needs to be effective fighting forces against the Japanese, and then shortly thereafter against the Axis powers in Europe, folks were willing to jump on the bandwagon. It's really nothing other than a communal effort to engage in and support the war effort so that we could be victorious in those battles, two front battles, by the way, the European and the Pacific theaters of war. Pretty interesting when you think about what's going on and how much overreach the government thinks they have now without any particular real disaster kind of a thing happening. And what they're trying to do right now is trying to reduce the emission standards on internal combustion engines so that we would be forced to purchase electric vehicles in the future? Well, there's no big crisis going on unless you really get into this climate change nonsense. But that's a topic for a whole different kind of video discussion. But during the day, back in the 1940s, folks were already sort of conditioned. They were patriotic. They were the great generation, and they were willing to put up what they needed to put up with to really get the job done and win the battle against the evil axis that was out there. There were also calls for the collection of scrap metals, aluminum cans, rubber of all kinds, and they were recycled into tires and equipment, tanks, all kinds of armaments that were necessary for the troops to be successful, and they sold U.S. war bonds to help fund all this kind of stuff and fund the investment that they made in the war effort. And eventually we won. It took a long time. It took way too many lives. Yeah, and war is not healthy for, so you can be a hippie if you want, but it was real. World War III is a real possibility. We've got China out there threatening to retake Taiwan that broke away from mainland China. We've got the Russians invading Ukraine. We've got the Iranians developing their own nuclear weapons right now, and by God, if they haven't succeeded by today, they'll be ready tomorrow for sure. And they are all our absolute political enemies right now. So the chances of World War III becoming a real possibility are there. And what can we do as preppers to be prepared for all this nonsense that's going to come? And I suspect that rationing will be a big part of what we're going to have to deal with when World War II actually starts. So what can you do? Well, I think you can do what every normal, sane prepper can do today, is stock up on the things that are going to be rationed. Things like gasoline, things like sugar and flour, butter and salt, and all the things, flour, and the things that you're going to need to actually get along. Canned vegetables, freeze-dried food, which they didn't have back in the day. Those are the kinds of things that we need to be focused on as individual preppers, as family preppers, as groups, as mags, you name it. We need to be focused on that kind of stuff, because I see that World War III is a true possibility. So I would urge everyone to take a look at some of the old videos that are out there about what was going on with rationing, how the rationing coupons worked, what was going on, the black market that was there, and really try to get in tune with what it was that was being rationed for the war effort, and stock up on that stuff now while we can. Stock up on flour, stock up on sugar, stock up on salt, stock up on all the canned goods that you can, all the freeze-dried goods that you can, and make sure that you've got a way to deal with those kind of rationing situations that are going to come up. if you're not into gardening already and you don't have space to do it, I would suggest that you just get a couple of planter boxes and put in a couple of tomato plants and start growing some tomatoes. You'd be surprised at the yield that you can get. But for us, we've got quite a nice garden going. We've already started. We've planted our seedlings. We've already got some of the early crops in, early peas and radishes and things like that already started. And I'll call it a victory garden. Well, let's use what they used back in the day. Unless you live in Oregon. Now, I guess Oregon has already made it very difficult for the average homesteader to grow its own garden and things like that. So you can watch a few of those videos that are flying around in the prepper community right now about the evilness that's going on in Oregon right now. But for us as legitimate, honest preppers, let's make sure that we are prepared for all those things: water, purification, home security, home defense, all your water, your food, you name it. Make sure that you've got all the alternatives set up so that you can survive and thrive during this upcoming potential crisis. This is the Prepared Suburbanite reminding you to be prepared always, and I'll see you all on the next video.